that your body knows what to do with it because it's already been dealing with it with 3G and 4G for the past several years. But it will be internet will be served up for AT&T, let's just say, under this general if you live in the rural areas, and under this space if you live in the city. And Verizon will be here if you live in the rural areas, and it'll be here if you live in the city, because keeping in mind the towers are much more closely placed in the city. I mean, you think it would be the other way around because the better penetration happens at this end of the spectrum, but that's how you can tell that the point is not efficiency. The point is control, which is why they're doing the more expensive thing, which is putting more towers in more places, no pun intended, in the urban areas, and less towers sparsely in the rural areas where there are less people to control or surf internet to. So 5G is really just a range. There are plenty of points along this range that do not bother the oxygen or the iodine in your blood. However, the 60 gigahertz millimeter wave frequency and the 8 gigahertz millimeter wave frequency both affect how your body regulates oxygen and iodine in your blood. And these were developed as a military technology so that it can drive a tank 100 yards from someone, blasts an invisible microwave gun at someone across the street, and choke them to death without ever touching them. That was the point of this development of this technology, and it has been integrated into a consumer technology that happens to have enough available IP addresses along this entire spectrum to also give you the Internet of Things, which means your cell phone can talk to your watch, which it already does via Bluetooth, but your toaster can now talk to your car, which can talk to your garage door opener, which can talk to your alarm and your thermostat. So there's this entire smart grid placed in and around your life through wireless technology. And the reason the spectrum is so long is so that each one can have a unique, so that there can be enough unique IP addresses.
Radio stations.
More or less, yeah. So instead of just 88.1 to 107.9 or whatever, it can go 88.1 to 1,088,000. It can just be a much wider spectrum.
Much more room to work on.
So that each one can have a more, so that there is the potential for bigger growth in 5G. Yes, you have your consumer division of the 5G spectrum, but you also have your military division of the 5G spectrum, which they don't like to talk about and they don't like people to know about, because I believe they plan on using this for things in the future that they don't want you aware of. And they just want you to buy into this like it's the next evolution of wireless technology. And in a way it is, but nothing about the 4G or 3G spectrum affected my ability to breathe. So now we're getting into issues because now we're talking about my life here, my breath. So in a nutshell, that is the 5G spectrum explained, and a little bit of why people are beginning to suggest that as they turn these towers on, and satellites really on, that actually deal with the bulk of the signal, right? The towers are all these like fat light towers that have, these big things at the top that kind of like giant cone heads at the top.
They look fairly harmless when you see
them. They look very harmless. We see them all the time in the city where we live. But what these will do is they'll introduce radiation poisoning to people's cells at so does 3G and 4G, but it's just at a much more benign rate. The increased millimeter wave exposure introduces radiation poisoning that in turn generates what are called exosomes, or cellular waste, or a function of your immune system to get rid of damaged versions of itself so that it can make way for, cleaning you out and restoring you. Only pharmaceutical-based science calls those exosomes viruses. And then you get into the whole discussion of what, COVID and how that relates to 5G. But it's not just as simple as, 5G causes COVID. It's not that simple, because it's a much more nuanced conversation that requires a bit of understanding about how electromagnetic radiation actually works.
So, what are the symptoms for radiation poisoning?
The symptoms for radiation poisoning, very similar to Chernobyl, are in many ways they're the same symptoms as COVID, put it like that, including and especially loss of taste and smell. Extreme radiation poisoning obviously will make your skin melt, but we're talking but not relatively speed. We're not talking Chernobyl status here. We're talking microwave oven on for forever status. If you stand next to the microwave for 10 years of your life, something will probably happen to your eyeballs. You won't die right away. However, it is not a good thing to stand next to the microwave. And what these towers are and what these satellites are basically large, high-powered microwave ovens that are emitting microwave radiation in conjunction with radio frequency radiation and gamma radiation, more likely once you get into 6G and 7G and all that.
What's the quote from the man in the early 1900s about when we started seeing frequencies in the air? Remember that?
Yeah, he was basically just saying that
this was when all the some sort of radiation was introduced. When you started to see people getting sick from
that all of the pandemics from 1918 to 1950, 40 something, I forget the Hong Kong one, were all at a time when radio towers were introduced in the early 1900s, when radar was introduced. And again, all of that stuff overlaps with this stuff here, radar and radio waves.
Telephone? No.
Well, not telephone wires, but wireless telephones for sure. So again, everything is on the electromagnetic spectrum, including things like light and Bluetooth and sound. All that's here, but it's an energy. It's a way of describing energy that in some cases is very benign, but in other cases can be very, very dangerous, especially when you're getting into this range.